Good afternoon. My name is Angie, and we are here at the Headwaters Science Center in beautiful Bemidji, Minnesota. We are kind of testing the waters, experimenting a little bit. This is the first time I've ever done a Facebook Live. And so we are planning on doing our Saturday snake feeding, even though it's pretty quiet in here. The snakes still get hungry, and it's still really fun to watch. So in about 5 minutes we are going to get started, but until then I'm going to turn the camera around. There's 2 people watching. Rusty is totally ready to eat, but we are not.
So can you see a chat?
I can see a thing that says comments will appear here. Awesome, thank you.
There you go.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We are here on a very, very quiet day at the Headwaters Science Center. It's probably a lot emptier and darker than many of our guests have ever seen before. But we are still here. We are still thinking of ways to find science you can touch. You can see Popey is doing a little bit of preening. We will be feeding snakes starting at 3 p.m. We started a little early just to kind of work out some of the kinks. I have never done a Facebook Live before, but here we are. So here we have Rusty. I think he knows it's feeding time. He's looking pretty hungry. Ryan is in the back getting the rats, getting lunch ready for our critters. So here we have Sophie. Good afternoon, everyone. I can't speak for the snakes, but I think they're probably a little bored, maybe be a little lonesome. I know I am a little bored and a little lonesome. Alright, this girl, she can be a little harder to see. Here we have little Miss Nettie. So we'll just do a little tour of the critter corner while we're waiting for lunch to be served. Here we have our legless lizards. Let's see what else we got. There we go, there's Artemis. She is getting ready to shed, so it'll be interesting to see who is hungry and who is not. Got our walking sticks. Alright, if you have any questions while we're doing this, I can see comments, so if you have questions, feel free to type them in and ask, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. Alright, we're getting close. We'll go visit with Angel while we wait, shall we? On the bright side, it is a beautiful day outside, so hopefully you can get some fresh air while keeping your distance. There's beautiful Miss Angel. Hi. Hi. She's so cute. So we will be ready to feed the snakes any minute now. We are just warming them up, waiting for 3 o'clock. Got some more people showing up. Welcome. Welcome to the Headwaters Science Center. It's dark and quiet, but we are still here. Come over and visit with Orion. Hey, buddy. Hello, Katie. I hope the weather is nice in Colorado. Hello, Kathy. Hello, Janae. So many people. I feel like we haven't been open for so long, and it's probably only actually been like a week. Right here we have our bog. Bog is waking up, as is the rest of nature outside. I saw some green. Check in with our amphibious friends. Let's see. There's a tarantula in there. Where's the other tarantula? Are you ready? All right, I think we are ready to start the snake feeding. So here is Ryan.
All right, hi everybody, I'm Ryan. And so our first snake that we're going to be feeding today is going to be Rusty. Rusty's kind of hiding underneath his newspapers here right now. And those newspapers are in there because, as you can see, the bedding we have in here is kind of this bark, kind of wood chip type of thing. And one of the interesting things about snakes is they like to swallow their food whole. And so the rats that we give them come to us frozen, and so the way we thaw them out is we just soak them in a bucket of water for a few hours, so they're coming out wet. And we don't want all those wood chips sticking to those rats as they're swallowing them. So you'll notice everybody in here has a little bit of a placemat. I promise they have more stuff in there normally. We take it all out and replace it with the newspapers when we are doing the feeding. And so Rusty is actually our newest snake. He is a red-tailed boa. He's about 15 years old right now, which is kind of middle-aged for a boa. They can live to be about 30. And he's about 8 feet long when he's fully stretched out. And what they're going to be eating today are going to be rats and mice. So I'm about to show you here is a bunch of dead rats and mice, so if you don't want to see that, you've been warned. But you can see there's a bunch of rats and mice, and they're various sizes. And so bigger snakes get bigger rats, smaller ones get smaller ones. Pretty much simple as that. And Rusty is our second biggest snake, so he's going to get our second biggest rat, which is this white one here. And Rusty actually just shed his skin a couple days ago. So sometimes they're a little leery about eating right around a shed, but Rusty's been a pretty good eater for as long as we've had him. And we'll see, we'll just dip it in there and see if I can't get him to strike at it. And there you go.
There we go.
So you can see Rusty's got a grip on it, kind of on the back end here. And I mentioned earlier that snakes actually don't chew their food, so when they're eating, they will typically want to either swallow it, usually from the front, but they'll swallow it from the back too. And all of the snakes we have here are non-venomous snakes, which means that the way that they kill their food is by constricting it. And what a constricting snake does is wraps its body around it and basically squeezes it to death. And so the last thing I do before I come out here to do the feeding is I zap the rats in a microwave for about a minute just to get them a little bit warmer. So Rusty's not 100% sure if that snake is alive or not, or if that rat is alive or not. So what you'll see him do is just kind of grab onto it and hold onto it for a few minutes until it comes down to room temperature, and then you'll see him start swallowing it. And snakes physically cannot chew, most of them, so he'll swallow it whole once he actually gets going on it.
All right, we'll check back with Rusty. Let's move on.
So our next one we're going to do is going to be Jeannie, the ball python. I'm actually going to adjust Jeannie here quick. Now Jeannie is probably our least reliable eater in the bunch, and that's normal for ball pythons. Ball pythons can go for extraordinarily long amounts of time without eating. It's been documented going well over a year without eating. Here we offer food once every 2 weeks, so it's a lot more than what they actually need, but snakes are generally pretty good about not eating if they're not hungry. But Jeannie actually has skipped her last few feedings, which is normal for her, so she skips probably 2/3 of feedings, I would estimate. And so what I'm going to do is she has kind of a smaller rat there, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of boop her in the nose with it, let her know it's there, and then I'm going to lay it there, and usually when she eats, she takes it overnight. So tomorrow morning when I come in, first thing I'm going to do is check and see if that rat is still there. If not, I'll take it out. If it is, I'll pull all her newspapers out and put her house back together in there. But ball pythons are kind of cool. They are one of the most popular pet snakes out there. They're actually originally from Africa, but they are invasive all over the world now because they're so popular as pets. You know, a lot of people have heard about all the snakes that are down in the Everglades as invasives right now. And a lot of them are these guys just because they're very, very popular in the pet trade. And she's actually getting ready to shed now too, it looks like. We have a lot of snakes that are getting ready to shed right now, which is normal. When it starts getting warmer, a lot of times that'll trigger sheds in a lot of the animals. When you're cold-blooded, your metabolism is tied really closely to your body temperature. So once it starts warming up, your body says, oop, time to grow. And when you're a snake, your skin doesn't grow with you. So you gotta shed it to keep growing. Next is Sophie, and Sophie's underneath her newspaper too, so I'll give her a little bit of a adjustment here. And Sophie is a corn snake. Corn snakes are another very, very popular pet snake. And Sophie is actually our youngest snake that we have here. She's only 4 years old right now. And we've had her for about 2 years now. And Sophie is getting a mouse. So kind of a smallish mouse. And so Sophie is a good example of kind of some care in action here. Sophie is a snake who would be very capable of taking a much bigger mouse than this, and she was getting those for a while when she was here. But we know she was gaining a little weight, so we downsized the size of mouse that she was getting. Makes more sense to shrink the meal than to change how often the meals come when it comes to snakes. You want to keep them on a pretty steady schedule. So if you need to adjust, the better way to do it is to adjust the size. And you can see she took a swipe at it there and kind of missed, but she's still interested in it, still trying to figure out what's going on there. So she'll probably take another bite here in a second. Maybe not. A little shy, but she's interested in it. She's just not quite sure what to do with it right now. But she's another one where we can set it down in here, and I'll kind of, again, just adjust her just a smidge, get her back on her papers, and I'll leave that right there for her. And she'll probably, oh, there she goes, right for it.
There we go.
And you can see she got hers by the back end too there. Normally they prefer to eat from the front, but if they get the back end, sometimes they'll swallow it that way too. And you can see just how far she's able to open her mouth there. So snakes are able to swallow food that is much bigger than their heads because of the way their jaws are made. They can actually sort of dislocate their jaw in the back to let them stretch their jaw out almost a full 180 degrees. But the other kind of cool part is their jaw at the bottom can also spread out. So your jawbone is actually made up of two separate bones that meet right in the middle of your chin. In our jaw, they fuse together to make one big solid bone. But in snakes, they don't. So they have two separate bones, so they can spread out and have a much wider bite. So a snake can swallow something that is bigger and thicker than it is.
We have a question. Grady would like to know if you have ever been bit.
I have been bitten here. As far as I know, we have never had a guest get bitten here at the Headwaters Science Center. Staff, yes, myself included. We recently just retired, actually. One of our longtime snakes here was Bo the Boa. He was here from 1997, I think it was, until late last year. And ultimately the thing that got him retired was he ended up biting me when I was getting ready to take him out. He bit me right on the wrist here. But kind of the nice part about having non-venomous snakes is that the bite's not actually that big of a deal. Part of not chewing your food means you don't have a whole lot of muscle in your jaw. So their teeth are sharp and they'll puncture skin pretty easily, but they're not going to do a whole lot of damage. So Bo bit me. You know, I got the full force of his bite. But, you know, I wrapped it up and was back out on the floor in 10 minutes helping people out again. No big deal.
Bo now lives with another employee, Jake.
Yeah.
So he has retired, and he's in a very lovely place, hanging out.
Yeah, and Bo actually just had his 30th birthday last month. Which,
Happy belated birthday!
like I mentioned with Rusty, it's about what the lifespan is for boas. So Bo's an old man. He had a good run here. He was probably ready for retirement after being here for 20-some years.
Right? Thank you, everyone who's tuning in. We appreciate it.
And so this one here is a western hognose snake, and this is one that's actually native to Bemidji. And he's a little bit of a spitfire, this one. I gotta be a little more careful when I'm feeding this one. And what he is getting is called a fuzzy. And a fuzzy is a young mouse, a juvenile mouse, just barely has its fur in. And so
Jake has checked in that Bo is about 5 feet watching this right now. 5 feet away watching this, so anybody's wondering how Bo is doing, he's chilling.
And so this is another one that's actually just getting ready to shed. And one of the things that you probably can't see on the video feed, but you might be able to, if you get real close in there, is you can see how cloudy the snake's eyes are. And so that's one of the things when they are getting ready to shed will happen is their eyes will get all cloudy. And a lot of times they're kind of aggressive, kind of defensive, a little more ornery during that time. And so when their eyes get all cloudy like that is usually when we quit taking them out with people. And this one in particular tends to be our kind of orneriest snake, a little bit of an attitude to him. But he's generally a pretty good eater too, so this is another one where I think I'll just leave it on his placemat here, and I'd imagine he'll come and take it eventually, but he's pretty clouded up right now, so he may or may not take it. Like I said, sometimes when they're shedding, it's a little bit of a question whether they're going to eat or not.
Aaron wants to know if we let the snakes out if there are no visitors.
So, we never let the snakes out just like on their own. They're never on the floor squirming around. We don't let them do that. They're quicker than you kind of expect them to be, and they're also, because of their body shape, able to get into some really tight little nooks and crannies that we don't want to have to wrestle them out of. But like right now when we don't have any guests in, something that we've been doing is just like taking them out and handling them. And so something with snakes is that if they don't get handled enough, sometimes they'll kind of not love getting handled when you come back and try and handle them again. So this is true for a lot of the animals we have here, all the reptiles, lizards, snakes, all that. You got to keep handling them to keep them handleable. And all of ours, like I said, they get handled a lot here, so they're very used to it by now. But who knows, if we end up being closed for a few months and they weren't getting handled in that time when we came back, they might be a little defensive and not ready for it.
All right.
So they have been coming out, just not getting
as much.
Not getting to sprint around. So next up is going to be our two actual non-snakes that we have eating today. And they kind of look like snakes. These are called legless lizards. And these guys are a little different. So this one you're seeing on the right here, this brown one, is actually our oldest and longest tenured animal we have here at the Science Center. This is Kepler. And we have had her since 1994. So she's very much an old lady here. And so just one thing that we do as a treat for her is we give her a little snack during the snake feeding. And now we recently got this other one here, because Kepler's kind of getting ready to retire. She's getting a little creaky. So we added a second one in here who's been taking most of the handling duties away from Kepler lately. And I can't just give a snack to one of them because they fight over it. So now I got to give a snack to both of them. So what they're getting are called pinkies. And pinkies are the smallest feeder mouse you can find generally. They're just little newborn mice. Don't even have their fur yet. And so this is just going to be a quick little snack for these guys. And so these guys eat 3 times a week normally. They eat Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And they get an omnivore diet, so they eat both meat and veggies. And something that's kind of cool is we talked a little bit about snake jaws and snake chewing. One of the things you'll notice with these guys that's a little different is they're actually going to chew on their food as they're taking it down. What are you doing? There.
What happens to the bones when the snakes eat them?
So bones generally are going to get digested. You don't see a ton of bone in the waist when it comes out the other end. The one thing that doesn't pass very easily is fur. So when you look at like a snake poop, it tends to be a lot of fur. Thinking about it. There we go. There's a nice big bite. So like I said, you can watch them for a little while and they'll crunch theirs down.
Hello, Carl.
And so the legless lizards are native in Eastern Europe. You'll notice we have ones that are 2 separate colors here, which is kind of interesting. They're the same species, but they have different patterns and different colors. That's because they come from 2 different areas, even though they're the same species. When you're an animal that has a really big range in the wild, sometimes camouflage needs are different from place to place. So a lizard from one area that is dealing with maybe darker soils is going to have different camouflage needs than one from a different area. And you can see this in a lot of animals, things like snakes too. You'll see this a lot. Corn snakes are one, like Sophie, are one that is very much like this too. Just naturally comes in a lot of different colors, a lot of different patterns because they have a huge range in the wild. And a corn snake in Virginia has different needs than a corn snake in Mexico.
Let's see. Mac wants to know if he can share his Cheez-Its. While we appreciate the offer, very, very kind, snakes actually are pretty picky. They only want to eat other animals, meat, guts. So cheesy crackers, even though they're awesome, they're not probably going to enjoy them too much.
I don't know how many would actually enjoy that. Maybe Angel, the parrot might take
The parrot will probably like it.
The parrot would take a Cheez-It. But snakes are one of the few animals out there that are what we call obligate carnivores. And so carnivore is a word you've probably heard and maybe have associated with some animals as an animal that eats meat. But there's very few things out there that'll only eat meat. So you can think about like your dog. We think of a dog as being a carnivore, but if you throw a banana to your dog, it's going to eat it. Snake's not going to do that. Snakes are strictly animal products, meat, eggs, bugs, things like that. And so we have one last very big rat here, and it's for a very big snake. This is another one of our newer snakes. This is Artemis. And Artemis is another red-tailed boa, so she's actually the same species as Rusty, the first snake we fed. And is actually about the same age, too. She's actually just a couple years younger. So Rusty is about 15, and she's, I think, 12. And she's actually getting ready to shed here, too. You can see her eyes a little cloudy, and can't really see it right now, but her belly is looking a little pink right now, too, which is another sign that a shed is coming. So we'll see if she's going to eat. And Artemis is kind of interesting because, like I said, same species, about the same age, even about the same length as Rusty, but Artemis probably weighs 3 times as much as Rusty does. And the big difference between them is that Artemis is a female boa, and Rusty is a male boa. And so with boas, the females get a lot bigger than the males do. And so it's not unheard of for female boas to get to be 12 up to 14 feet long, whereas the males, if they get to 10 feet, that's a huge male boa. And so it looks like she's not going to strike at it right this second. She's kind of in a pretty relaxed position right there. So I'm just going to leave that one in there for her too. And we'll check in later. She's one who doesn't always eat right away at feeding time. She usually likes to pick hers up at her leisure later. But we can check in on some of the other ones. We can see if the hognose snake has found his yet.
Let's see. Why do they eat 3 days a week? So we offer our snakes, mice, rats, etc., every other Saturday. The 3 days a week were the legless lizards that we were showing you guys a little earlier. So these snakes actually eat way less than 3 days a week. And the reason that they are able to do that, well, one of the reasons, there's a bunch, is being cold-blooded means you don't have to burn a ton of energy to keep your body at a certain temperature. So they can go with a lot less food than something like a mammal can.
Right. So she's already got hers down. So yeah, Sophie tends to get hers down pretty quick. Like I said, she's been getting a pretty small one lately, so she tends to suck it down pretty quick, whereas the ones that have a little bit bigger one for their body size, it takes them a little longer. Let me check on Rusty over here. He's kind of underneath the newspapers. But he's one that's sometimes kind of fun to watch. Good start there. You can see he's got a little bit of the bark on there because he got underneath his papers, but that's okay. A little bit's not a big deal. We just don't want him swallowing a ton of it. And as he's working that down, you can see he's moving each side of his jaw separately. So he moves one side and then he moves the other side. And that's having the jaw that's split in the middle in action there. You can pull it down with one side and then kind of adjust and pull it down with the other side until it eventually gets down. The other thing that you might see as he's opening his mouth here, kind of depends on what side he puts it on, is when you're swallowing a big meal like this, breathing can be kind of an issue. So snakes have this cool feature where they can actually take their trachea, their windpipe, and they kind of bring it up into their mouth. And so every once in a while you might see a little tube that kind of pops out the side of the meal there, and that's what that is that trachea popping out to take a breath.
Let's see, why do we put the newspapers down?
Yeah, so I mentioned that at the beginning. The newspapers are there kind of as placemats for the snakes. All this bark here, we don't want them swallowing that, at least not too much of it. And you can see it kind of sticks to the rats because we buy the rats frozen and we thaw them out just in water, so they're wet when they go in there. And so to keep them from getting too covered in bark, we try and have them eat on the placemats. They're not always great about it, but we do what we can with it. So red-tail boas, like Rusty, are one that is pretty popular in the pet trade too. When people want to get like a big snake, this is usually the one they get. They're native in Central and South America. You hear them called Colombian boas every once in a while. Common red-tail boas, even just boa constrictor. You hear them. There's a ton of names for them. And Rusty is one who shows a little bit of that popular in the pet trade. So one of the things that'll happen with animals that are popular as pets is we start to breed them to look how we want them to look. And you can see this in a lot of different animals. Things like dogs have all kinds of weird features that they wouldn't have if they were alive in the wild. So one of the things that Rusty has is he's got kind of this sheen to him, where if you catch him in just the right light, he's got kind of this rainbow sheen to him that would be there in the wild, but it's been augmented for the sake of being a little bit more showy and a little bit more pet friendly, I guess. And Rusty, like I said, we just got in November, so he's actually our newest snake, and he came to us from World of Fish, a herpetology place in Hermantown, Minnesota. So he was donated to us, so thanks to World of Fish for that. So we don't buy any of our animals here, we get them donated. There's a couple of them that we'll just collect right out in the wild, things like frogs and salamanders and things like that. We'll just go out and collect ourselves. But the reptiles mostly get donated to us from breeders. A couple of them are former pets. We try not to take too many former pets in. We don't want to be a place that people come abandon their pets at.
Right, we are not a rescue or a veterinary clinic.
But in certain situations where when we have a long-time boa that recently retired and then another boa presents itself to us, we're not above taking it.
Right.
And the last kind of hardest part for him, and if you remember when we initially watched him strike at it, he actually grabbed it by the back end. So while we were out there feeding all the other snakes, he was in here getting his rat turned around so he could swallow it head first. And kind of that last hardest part for him to get down is the hips. And once they get past the hips, it tends to be kind of one just big spaghetti noodle that they slurp down. Artemis is over there checking her rat out. She's not biting on it yet, but she's inspecting it. She's probably gonna start on it soonish here. Then if you could, if you were feeling Rusty, one of the things you might feel is that right around their throats, right at kind of at the top of their body by their head, they have a lot of kind of loose, stretchy skin that you can feel when you're handling them normally. And you can see that in action now where they have all this loose skin for the sake of being able to stretch out when they're swallowing big meals like this. Just a little bit of tail left. So then after the snakes are done eating, we won't handle them for at least 24 hours afterwards. Kind of the weird part about snake anatomy is their organs are all very kind of long and tube-like, much like their bodies. So their stomach is very long and makes up a big proportion of their body. And so if you handle them too much right away after they are, right after they eat, it's not uncommon for them to vomit. And we don't want them to vomit because it's gross and smelly and I don't want to clean it up. But also because their stomach is so big, it's very stressful on their bodies to do it. So basically if you come in on a Saturday afternoon after the feeding, you're not going to see the snakes coming out. And for some of them, we might take them off on Sunday too. Usually the bigger snakes will give 2 days, the smaller ones will let come off after 24 hours.
Is this the snake that just shed?
This is the snake that just shed, so you posted that video?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, this snake, this is the snake that was in the video that got posted earlier today or yesterday. This is Rusty. Like I said, he's pretty new here, so this is only, I think, the second time he's shed since he's been here. And how often snakes shed is going to be determined by the environment they're living in, how old the snake is, what type of snake it is. So younger snakes shed a lot more than older snakes do because they're growing faster. Snakes in warmer conditions are also going to shed a lot more than snakes in cooler conditions because, again, their metabolism is tied really closely to their body temperature, so when they're warmer, they grow faster. And so their skin doesn't grow with them, so it's kind of like a different set of clothes. They have to shed their old stuff, buy new stuff as they're growing. And we can see, we actually close this up. We have Rusty's shed over here on the touch table. And so if it's a really, really, really nice shed, we'll keep it and kind of stretch it out, and we'll use it in educational programming. But if it's one that kind of gets broken up a little bit, what we'll do is we'll just take it and we'll throw it on our touch table here for the kids to play around with. So this is the one that Rusty just shed, and this is probably down kind of towards his tail end. And you can see something kind of cool is if you look real closely, you can see there's kind of wider scales here than there is on this side. And so those are the scales that are on the belly for the snake. So they have these wider scales that are what let them move around. And you can even see like the pattern stays on there. So kind of that saddle pattern that the boas have on them is still preserved on the shed skin. Versus, you can look at, this looks like a Sophie shed, so the corn snake. And she has much lighter coloring, so her sheds are a lot of times just kind of almost clear. The pattern doesn't show up as well on them.
Here is a picture. Someone was asking where a snake's stomach is.
Yep. So in the yellow here is the digestive system here. So the yellow here is the esophagus, and the stomach starts kind of in here, and it actually is about a third of their body length is just stomach before it finally gets into the intestines. And how long food is going to stay in the digestive system, again, depends on the snake. Rusty actually just pooped probably last night. And that's pretty standard for him, is he goes to the bathroom on a schedule that's pretty much matches our feeding schedule, so he'll usually poop a day or two before the feeding. The smaller ones go more often. They'll usually go just a few days after the feeding. Like Artemis, the biggest one, she might go a couple feedings between going to the bathroom. So again, depends on the snake, and how big they are seems to be the biggest thing that associates with it, is how long they keep all that food inside of them.
CJ wants to know if snakes can eat each other.
Our snakes can't because they don't interact with each other. But yeah, in the wild, a snake absolutely might eat another snake. It's, you can swallow pretty easily, I'd imagine.
Snake would probably be a pretty easy snack.
Yeah. No hips to get around. Slides right down.
Yeah.
But you can see, actually, here's a cool thing. You can see Sally's belly here. You can see it's kind of different colors than what his back looks like. And so something that's kind of nifty that hognose snakes will do is when they're scared, they might roll onto their back and play dead. And that's one thing they do to protect themselves out in the wild. Because a lot of animals won't eat something that they find that's already dead. And so that orange and black kind of blocky color, and it's a little faded right now because she's got a shed coming up, is meant to look kind of gross and rotten and inedible. So we kind of think of snakes as being mostly predatory animals, but snakes have predators to worry about too, and they got to come up with ways to protect themselves from their predators as well. Good climbers too. Sally's always climbing the sides of his tank.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in with us and watching us feed snakes. Oh, Titus wants to know how heavy and long the biggest snake is, Artemis.
So Artemis is about 8 feet long when she's fully stretched out. Weight-wise, somewhere between 40 and 45 pounds.
So she's a pretty good size
Yeah.
snake. All right, so we are trying to come up with good ways to interact with you guys. So if you have requests or ideas or questions, let us know and we will figure out the best answer or ways we can continue to bring you science you can touch.
Yep.
So stay tuned to our Facebook page and our website. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah,
Stay
thanks,
curious.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.